So the SME Business Excellence Awards of 2017 is a great time for DNB to just pause and reflect. This is a sector in which we have been a partner for more than 10 years. It's a sector that we are proud to be a part of, and over the 10 years, we have tracked it at two levels. One, we have compiled the voice of the Indian SME over the 10 years, the problems that they face and the issues that they'd like resolved. Secondly, we've also done the international comparisons with countries where we as SMEs in India would like to compare ourselves. So where do we come out? In summary, the message is a pretty mixed one. To put it differently, if I were the SME industry in India, I would be pretty confused. So there's a few things that I'd feel pretty good about. Firstly, I account for something like 30% of the GDP in the country. I employ about 117 million employees in India. And the government has clearly taken note of my contributions because there's a bunch of initiatives like Startup India, Stand Up India that are focused on improving my contribution to the economy. On the other hand, there's a couple of areas which make me feel a little bit underwhelmed. Firstly, if I compare with my counterparts in about a dozen countries, I actually come out looking pretty disappointing. And these countries are the countries that you'd expect. It's got the BRIC countries, it's also got Indonesia, Philippines, it's got a few African countries, and directionally the competitiveness index is actually quite poor for the Indian SME. Secondly, the problems that the Indian SME have had for the past 10 years have pretty much sustained. The five biggest problems that I have today are problems that I've had for 10 years. These are access to finance, access to a skilled workforce, access to infrastructure, 24/7 electricity and technology. And the problem is that it's still a problem today. So there has been some improvement, but not enough. So, on the WTO competitiveness index, as done Bradstreet, we've compared across three parameters. The three parameters are compete, which basically is a summary of how we are now. In other words, the operations, product, the efficiency. Secondly, we look at change, which is the ability to evolve, the agility, the dynamism, the innovation of the industry. And thirdly, connect. Connect is the link between what is now and the ability to evolve. And in all of these across 12 countries, India comes out at something like, I would say, the bottom 25%. So that's clearly an area where we need to improve. So what are the issues and challenges for the SMEs in India today? And what is it that the government needs to do, and as an industry, where do we need to evolve? Firstly, we need to prioritize the issues. Well, as done in Bradstreet, we've done that already. We've told you what are the 5 issues that need to be fixed. Now let's go and fix it. Secondly, what is an SME? From a policy point of view, I think we need to define it again. In India, we define an SME or an MSME as in terms of assets. So either investment in equipment, if it's services, or investment in plant and machinery, if it's manufacturing. In most other countries and international bodies, it's not defined on the basis of assets or equipment or plant and machinery. An SME is defined on the basis of number of employees or revenue. That is a much more robust way to define it, and it eases the way to bringing the policy benefits straight to the entities that need it the most. Secondly, even if we choose to identify an SME on the basis of assets, the Indian parameters are now about a decade old. So in India, it's defined on the basis of something like $400,000 to $700,000. I'm sorry, $40,000 to $400,000. In IFC and MIGA, it is defined as $15 million. So that's about 20 times what we define it as. In the EU, it's defined as $48 million, so about 100 times. China defines it as about $60 million in terms of assets, to the extent we want to define it on the basis of assets. So these are a couple of things that need to happen. Finally, why is it important? We need the SME industry to be strong in India. As I've defined earlier, 30% of the GDP comes from there. It could be a lot more. 117 million people are employed by them. It could be a lot more. But also some of the softer aspects of the MSME industry in India. It is the space where much more agility, much more entrepreneurship, much more innovation can happen. It's also the sector that absorbs the emerging workforce of the country. If we don't make it strong, there's a flip side to the industry being weak. It endangers the economy in a way that will be very, very harmful. It is the sector that is vulnerable to business continuity. It is vulnerable to stability in terms of the entities. It is prone to credit risk defaults. It's prone to anti-money laundering and financial crime compliance risks. So finally, we've got a choice to make. We've got to make the right choice, and we need to execute. It is in the interest of the sector and on the country. Thanks very much.